Hello, I'm the Dark Master, and welcome back to the Kirby Right Back at You Retrospective. In today's video, we shall be covering the ninth episode, the Fofa Factor, or as it's called in the original Japanese anime, Lo 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 and La 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 Melody of Love. This episode obviously focused on Fololo and Falala and their background, with also an appearance by the first voiced monster of the show. But as always, we'll get to that. Let's start with that plot. The episode opens, as many do, to an outside shot of Castle Didi, where we see Fololo and Falala. And okay, before we go further, let me say this for the record. Fololo and Falala are only called by this name in the English dub. In the games and the Japanese original, they are called Lo 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 and La 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 without the F, which is a much better name and easier to remember. For sake of consistency, I will be referring to the names Fololo and Falala because that's how I know them, and yes, I know it's dumb name, but I mean, come on. I gotta stress that their names are always dumb, no matter the version. The pair fly down the hall with such velocity that they bump into some Waddle Dees. In the Japanese original, they apologize to them. They then enter the throne room as Didi wants them to get his fortune that he had ordered from Mabel for the day, with Escargoon complaining that they are late. The pair agree. However, Didi has a strange condition that Escargoon elucidates that elongates the episode's premise.
Not so fast, Blue Boy. No reason for you both to go. Fololo can fly over to the fortune teller alone. You stay here in the castle, Missy.
Now, for some odd reason, Didi in this episode wants the pair to split up. Why? I mean, he already has several assistants like Sir Ibram, Waddle Doo, and a bunch of Waddle Dees that could easily do this task, and the pair don't even need to split up in order to deliver the message. While the English dub leaves this reason unexplained and kind of gives a poor reason for the conflict of the episode, the Japanese original actually does give a reason for why the king wants the pair to split up. Didi wants Falala to give him a shoulder massage. Yeah, still a pretty weak reason. I mean, he can just get someone else to do that. But in either version, they respond by saying they never split up. Didi, excessively angry, demands the pair to do their job and split up. Fololo points out that they actually serve Sir Ibram and not the king. The king then correctly points out how he is in charge of Sir Ibram, therefore he's in charge of them. And I mean, that is true, and threatens that he can always kick them out. Escargoon also points this out, and Didi yells at the pair to split up. After we cut to the outside of the castle, we have the intro. After said intro, we cut to Fololo and Falala talking to Tiff about their encounter with Didi, and how he's always way too involved with his subjects' personal lives, which I mean, Dee Dee seems very unreasonable, but then again, the two could have split up for about, I don't know, 15 minutes, and then this entire episode's plot wouldn't have happened, so. I don't know, I just think they are both kind of unreasonable in this regard. In the Japanese original, we hear Ladylike and Tough talking in the background of this patio scene before we cut to them arguing. In the English dub, them standing outside on the patio is slightly shortened and we don't hear this audio, so the cut to them is much more abrupt. The mother and son are arguing over homework and how he needs to study it. Let's just say, with scenes like this, I can understand why Tough's character is not as, let's just say, as well liked as some of the other characters of this anime. I mean, seriously, this is just ear aches inducing.
Daddy! Stiff upper lip, son. Your mother's...
I mean, it's realistic to how children sound, but it's also not exactly pleasant. He complains to his father, who is much more loose with the rules than his mother, who rebuffs him, saying that they must be strict as they have to teach Tough discipline. And, well, they are their parents, so that's reasonable. And she asks if they don't, who else will? They are then interrupted when Fololo and Falala enter the room and ask the question to who their parents are. The pair immediately forget about Tough and proceed to answer the question in a manner that is very beat around the bush, with them first making the claim that a stork brought them. Even Tough calls them out on this childish claim. Tiff then pulls on her mom's dress and asks why they don't just tell the pair the truth. Once again, Ladylike and Sir Ibram deflect and say they were found in a cabbage patch. Tiff, being smarter than her brother, calls out that baloney and demands the truth. The kids are gently shoved out as the parents advise them to forget about ancient history, with the formerly strict mother even letting Tough out of the hook with his homework. In the Japanese version, the exchange is slightly different, with Ladylike saying they were found in a bamboo patch, which is a subtle reference to the old Japanese folktale, the tale of the bamboo hunter, which is considered to be one of the oldest extant Japanese prose works. Indeed, the prose dates all the way back to the 10th century and tells the tale of Princess Kaguya and would influence many things. Anyway, Sir Ibram unfortunately contradicts this and says Folo and Fala came from a peach that flowed down the river, which is another reference to another part of Japanese folklore, that being Momotaro, who was born from a peach. In either version, Tiff and Tough, after being kicked out, decide to go walk down the hall. In the Japanese version, Tough even notices the sudden change in behavior of the parents. With ear to door, the parents wait until the pair are out of hearing range, and then start talking to each other about how they came across Fololo and Falala. Now, some people complain about this as they have no reason to talk about it, but really, if you know anything about humans, they do tend to talk about, reminisce the past. We then cut to a flashback, which, once again, I just say I would prefer if there was a bit of visual indicator that it was a flashback, but this version actually has a slight visual indicator. Apparently, they improved that from previous episodes. I mean, in this episode, there's a slight bloom effect, but again, it's so subtle to the point where I only see it if I actually look for it. And that might be due to the poor re-upload visuals of this on YouTube. Anyway, in said flashback, we see the two parents tending to a stroller with a baby Tiff inside, and Ladylike reminding her husband to be quiet when... Yeah, the two little blobs fall out of the sky, being tossed out by King Dedede, who then proceeds to sit there and stare menacingly. From there, the two then talk to each other. In the Japanese version, they say that the pair came from a monster called Lola, whereas the English dub goes further and has him say that the monster Fofa had been split in two. Okay, so I and many others have issue with this scene. Let's break them down. Firstly, some complain about Sir Ibram here manspreading in this particular scene. This is dumb for 4 reasons. Numero uno, he has no legs, so what is he spreading? Number 2, he's the only person on the seat, so he's not impeding anyone else. 3, he sits with his belly like that because he's fat. Have you ever seen fat people? They tend to splay out when they sit down. 4, this pose lasts for less than 10 seconds. I mean, even if it is manspreading, who cares? It's a fictional character. Move on with your freaking life. I mean, come on. It doesn't impact the episode at all. Why even bring that up? Much more serious of an issue is how, especially in the English dub, this dialogue kind of ruins the big reveal of the episode. And I will say, I think this was more of a problem in the English dub, but it was still a thing in the Japanese original. How would Sir Ibram know about Fofa, let alone the fact that he was originally one monster split in twine? I mean, it's just excessive. And it really does kind of ruin the surprise. Like, I can understand the Japanese version. Maybe he overheard it from King Dedede, and honestly, had we got that dialogue instead, there would probably be sufficient mystery to string us along, and people might not have complained. But not the English dub. I mean, it just releases its load too early, and it really just ruins the surprise. Ladylike points out how they kept it a secret to not break Folo and Fallout's hearts. Unfortunately, it turns out that they have a pink eavesdropper, and let's just say the fact that they discover it might not have as much a negative reaction as they think, but we'll get to that.
I hear the name of Fofa.
Kirby is, despite being a baby, able to put the pieces together, and then we cut to a Waddle Dee delivering the fortune Dedede requested, which begs the question, why didn't he just send a Waddle Dee in the first place? I mean, then again, without this weak instigation, we wouldn't have gotten this episode, but like, it's still just kind of weird. And I know people are going to be like, it's a nitpick, but it is noticeable, especially when the cause of an episode is so weak. Dedede then asks Escargoon to read out what his fortune is. In the Japanese original, it has the message saying, "You must show restraint, and do not let yourself be swayed by sweet talk." Honestly, pretty unrelated to the episode's theme and main conflict. In the English dub, it says, "If you look for trouble, your trouble will double." Oh, and also that the king's account is past due and it's time to pay up. I actually like the English dub better because it does actually play into the conflict of the episode and the general theme. In either version, angry at the Cappy's perceived microaggression, he slugs the messenger, leaving Escargoon left implanted into the wall. Now, this reason for this differs between the versions, as in the Japanese original, it was likely due to the king not liking his fortune, whereas in the English dub, it's because obviously he doesn't want to pay his rent / debt to the fortune teller. Angry, the king then goes to order another monster. In the Japanese version, Escargoon advises him not to use the monster in retaliation, whereas in the English dub, he just asks for some aspirin. Pressing a button, he calls the enemy sales guy, who informs him that he has a great deal, an exclusive offer for this guy, is a great sales guy. He then proceeds to tell them about the monster he's offering called Slice and Splice, which cuts up its foes and puts them back together, all jumbled up. Escargoon tells him not to buy the monster he deems a cut rate. But the enemy sales guy then tells him that they are offering preferred customers like DDD a special deal. Which you gotta ask how bad the other customers are if debt-filled DDD is a preferred customer. In the Japanese original, the dialogue is a bit more clunky as enemy sales guy is saying it's only $39.8 million. That's still a lot. Also, I love how he says in both versions it comes with an instruction video and 2 weapons, which is not really all that much of a bonus. And to be frank, the monsters we're about to meet is worthless without his weapons. Kind of like how some companies will sell a console without a controller in a way to get extra money from their easily duped fans. Escargoon tries to warn DD about Mabel's fortune, but he is brushed aside and DDD orders the monster. So yeah, this is Slice and Splice, whose Japanese named Kitakari Hatakari literally means cutting and pasting in Japanese. And a insectoid 4-limbed robot that really isn't all that dangerous that has weapons. Oh, and speaking of those, for weaponry, he has 2 bladed rods, one called the Moon Rod, the other the Sun Rod. These are actually modeled after Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright, a dual boss from Kirby's Adventure all the way back then. Mr. Shine is a moon, and Mr. Bright is the sun, for those curious. This marks one of only 2 references to the character in the show, and I'm mixed on this. On one hand, I like the reference. On the other, I really wish we could have gotten the actual Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright to serve as antagonists for an episode. Or multiple episodes. And you know what? Maybe they would have left more impact than Slice and Splice. But on the other hand, I don't really know how they would fit into the whole slicing and splicing themes of this episode. Nor do I think they'd be particularly compelling either way, as their designs aren't that appealing anyway. Oh, and he's voiced by Ted Lewis. He really doesn't talk all that much, which is a real shame because there are so few monsters that actually speak, and he actually is more memorable of all the monsters. I would still like to see him in the games at some point. He's better than the 2 that did get in, I'll say. And the Japanese voice actor, Oshamu Hoshoin, wasn't as good, I'll have to say. It was much more forgettable than Ted Lewis's performance. Back to the plot. DD orders Slice and Splice to come over and show him his abilities. Escargoon suggests they watch the complimentary instructional video. In the Japanese version, there's a small scene in which he turns back because DD tells him to wait. As instead of watching the video, DD decides to stick Slice and Splice on the snail. The Japanese version, I think, is a bit better in its transition, but on the flip side, the English dub is much more snappy. Escargoon, justifiably terrified, runs away, but turns around and starts running in DD's general direction. Antics ensue, and Slice and Splice accidentally use his powers on the pair, leaving them, well, let's just say DD's a bit sluggish now, and Escargoon has a belly size larger than his IQ. I mean, just look for yourself. Understandably, this causes the pair of them to freak out, with their yells being so loud they are heard by Sir Ibram and Lady Like. And there's this just unfortunate pun.
Now what's wrong? Did you hear that screaming?
The king and Escargoon are always losing their heads over something.
It turns out that they've placed a covering over Kirby's mouth so that he couldn't repeat the word. In the Japanese version, Kirby's voice is actually indistinct, whereas in the dub, it's just slightly muffled. A little odd change, but it really doesn't affect the episode, so it doesn't really bother me. The pair try to get Kirby to forget about what he overheard them say, but it's no use, as like a baby or parrot, he just keeps repeating the word Fofa or Lola. We then cut back to King Dedede and Escargoon, who have been put back right together by Slice and Splice. Escargoon in the Japanese original is surprised that Slice and Splice can talk, as this is the first time a monster speaks in the anime. Whereas in the English dub, he makes this meta reference and says sarcastically that he's entertaining and suggests that he be put to work in the document shredding department. Which, I mean, if you think about it, would only double the amount of paper they have. Dedede, fully impressed by Slice and Splice's abilities, decides to go to Capitan and terrorize the civilians, which, if you consider the last episode, might not be the best idea. Dedede, upon arriving, regardless, to the village, 6 Slice and Splice on the Cappies due to the rather slightly abrasive note left by Mabel, or at least what he perceives to be abrasive. Terrorizing the village, Slice and Splice mix up everybody, resulting in this.
Oh, this is bad!
Though he apparently also messes up Dedede and Escargoon again, indicating this monster has less precision than Billy the Fridge is on a salad bar. I'm not the only one who notices this, as even Escargoon is annoyed at why he was all mixed up. Tokori and Nick are particularly dismayed at their mix-up. Rick does talk about how bad bats are, though. The pair then leave, knowing the monster is far too powerful for them, and they go off to get Kirby. Ironically, if they had stayed behind, they would have actually been put back to normal. A bit contrived in contrast to the Japanese original.
Heck as much as you do, but that there monster's too tough for us to tackle.
Crikey, Kirby's got to give that beast a shellacking so I can get me fur back.
English dub, they don't even think about warning Kirby, they just leave to tell Tiff and Tuff about it. Dedede gloats about the state of his citizens before Chief Bookums threatens him. Of course, having the huge king's body makes this far easier. The mayor also demands to be returned back to normal. Really, Dedede shouldn't have switched up his own body for the feeble body of some random Cappy. And we don't see all the Cappy bodies with a sheep, which there must be. Maybe it was too terrifying to think of Cappies with sheep's heads. I mean, poor Curio got mixed up with a non-living ammonite. Escargoon, noticing the increased tension, advises Dedede that they should turn everyone back to normal and go after Kirby, who's the real target. Dedede agrees and announces that he will return them back to normal, as he is a nice despot. Slice and Splice seem rather miffed at this, and I don't blame them. Having to undo all your work just because some arbitrary reason. Rather annoying, isn't that? We then cut to Tiff and Tuff oogling at the mixed-up Tokori and Rick. Tuff points out the obvious, to which Tokori references Columbo, which was an old American crime drama that aired from 1971 and 1978, which was already rather old when this anime came out, and now it's like just ancient. Apparently, it also was by Peter Talk, who passed in June 23rd, 2011, which, man, it's always depressing when you learn that someone dies. In the Japanese original, they demand to know where Kirby is, while in the English dub, has them demand to have their old bodies back. Just then, Kirby, whose mouth is still covered up from the previous scene with Sir Ibram and Lady Like, walks in. Noticing this, instead of removing the bandage, Tokori and Rick just stand there, fatting around, giving enough time for Dedede and his monster to arrive. Really, you can see the impacts of Ladylike and Sir Ibram here are still being negative overall to this episode. Fololo and Fala pull Tiff and Tuff out of the way. In the Japanese version, they have a line, but that's cut from the English dub. Slice and Splice charges forward. Kirby dodges him with his first attack, but after DDD hits him in the head with his tank, Slice and Splice cuts the fallen Kirby with his moon rod, and leading to, well, just watch this. And yeah, that's something else Slice and Splice can do. Rather shocking. Now, if you expect some unwarranted 3-minute rant about how this is problematic or whatever, then I'm afraid you're on the wrong YouTube channel. You see, Escargoon makes this observation that serves as the reason behind this shocking ability. Apparently, he says that everyone has a more masculine and a more feminine side, and this is true, but this is only in the English dub. In the Japanese version, it's completely unexplained. So, even though this can be considered a poor explanation, that's still better than no explanation. So here we are, left with two Kirbys, one orange and female, clearly indicated by the bow and subtle eyelashes, and a boy who is green. Now, some take offense to this, and to those people, I ask you, do you think giving Kirby a pair of breasts would have been appropriate, especially in regards to the age demographic this is intended to? You would have complained literally no matter what, so why are you getting so offended? This is really something not to get angry over. The King and Escargoon then have a brief daydream of what they would look like if they were split up, and funnily enough, the female halves of each other fall within each other. Gross and hilarious at the same time. You two got some internal feelings got to work out. My gosh. DDD then orders Slice and Splice to cut Kirby again until there's nothing left to cut. Folo and Fala, however, jump into the rescue and carry both Kirbys away into the castle. They are quickly followed by DDD, Escargoon, and Slice and Splice, who are themselves followed by Tiff and Tuff at a safe distance. After getting to safety, they comment on how the split Kirbys are very similar to themselves. After some hesitation, they split up, each carrying a Kirby in a different direction. The two Kirbys giggle the whole time. DDD notices and he orders Slice and Splice to chase after Fololo with him, who hides up upon the roof. Unfortunately, the green Kirby loses his balance and is only barely caught in time to avoid detection. That, of course, is unfortunate, as he only eludes DDD's detection, as he's seen by Slice and Splice, who then attempts to slice them up, only to miss and hit DDD, who himself had just turned around to see it, leading to hilarious results. Overall, the ensuing chase is quite funny, as DDD, Escargoon, and Slice and Splice all struggle to try and capture Folo and Fala. Also, Fala, for this one brief moment of the animation, has this error where her feet are colored pink. Also, another error can be seen here. I mean, look at this. The animation doesn't even fit the screen. What the heck is that? That seems like something you'd easily notice, but that's kind of just weird how they missed that. That's not all. In this chase scene, there's even a reference to the Scooby-Doo chase scenes that is longer in the Japanese original. In either version, the chase ends with Fololo and Fala having hid behind a golden statue, tipping it over, leading it to hit DDD in the head, rendering the poor fool unconscious. Despite that, Escargoon and Slice and Splice corner the pair, rendering them with no escape. Remaining iron-willed, Fololo and Fala say that they won't let them hurt Kirby. It is then that Slice and Splice finally realizes that the pair are familiar, and that we are finally revealed to the big twist of the episode. Or at least it would be a twist if it had not been for the fact that there was that scene with Sir Ibram and Lady Like. Seriously, can I just say you didn't need that scene? It so underscored the twist. I mean, perhaps it was still obvious to many people, but still, like, why? Like, that seemed unnecessary. It really could have been cut, or at the very least reworded. We then get a flashback from Slice and Splice's perspective, and that's pretty good, but a bit weird. You see, a few years ago, Dee Dee ordered a monster from Enemy. Nightmare tells the sales guy to split up the weakling Fofa to double the price. Taking one product and splitting it up into two to make more money. Where have we heard that before? Fofa Lola in the Japanese original, as their names are not Lolo and Lola, but I've already explained that, is voiced by Tara Sounds for like 3 lines. Nothing really special. I mean, he's just a purple blob that even the Enemy sales guy says is useless. I will say that he has nice hair. His only ability is that he's able to float effortlessly in the air. So one note, I almost forgot to put him in the video. That's just how much of an impact he left as a character, aka very little. It is interesting though, and I do think it could be used as an enemy in a video game for Kirby, but that's unlikely. Recognizing their useless nature, Dee Dee dumps the pair onto Sir Ibram and... Wait a second, how would Slice and Splice know that? Does he stalk his victims? Like, this is really weird. How would he know that unless he was told that by King Dedede? But King Dedede didn't even know about Slice and Splice, so how would he know that? Overall, this backstory is interesting. I like the idea of taking an individual and splitting them up against their wishes, but honestly, it really wasn't handled all that well. I will say, though, it does make Slice and Splice more of a character than any other monster up to this point, and of the series. Shame what happens to him, though. Despite this being a seemingly large and important revelation, the pair are actually seemingly pretty cool with it. Happy, in fact. Which makes the whole scene of Sir Ibram and Lady Like trying to keep it a secret, leading to Kirby's own split up, completely irrelevant. So thanks for rendering parts of your episode irrelevant. That is always a good sign. Dedede recovers from his concussion as Tiff and Tuff arrive, having overheard everything, commenting on about how stuff we already know about. Slice and Splice then decides just to be a douchebag and declares that they will never be one again. Kinda odd, as there's no reason for him to do that. In the Japanese original, he actually offers to make them one again, which does give him a bit more character. Unfortunately, his voice acting wasn't all that good in the Japanese original. Then Diddy jumps them, but Follow and Follow distract Slice and Splice as the Kirbys make a break for it. Escargoon almost captures them, but then Tiff and Tuff knock him away. Diddy confronts the pair, and in the Japanese version, even going as far as to threaten them with the treason and the death penalty. Meanwhile, Slice and Splice had jumped up onto a table in order to try and catch Follow and Follow, but doing so renders him unstable. They push the monster over, using him to distract Dedede. They also grab the Sunrod. Having done so, Fololo, Falala, Tiff, Tuff, and the Kirbys run to the rooftop, where they decide to put Kirby back together using it first. And it's Quite adorable how they put them back together. Before they can do the same for Folo and Fala, Slice and Splice catches up to them and prepares to attack, charging at them. Tiff gives the order and Kirby starts sucking hard, and for the first time actually causes visible stress on a monster, with Slice and Splice struggling to hold on to his moon rod. It really indicates how Kirby has grown stronger over the series, and also shows Slice and Splice's relative weakness. In desperation, Slice and Splice tries to slam his moon rod upon Kirby, but displaying new wisdom, Kirby stops inhaling, leading to the monster mistiming his attack and facepalming into the stone floor, dropping his weapon, which Kirby then inhales, getting a new ability. So yeah, this is the cutter ability. Some people consider it little more than a mobile version of the sword, but I don't know, as an ability, it does do its own thing in both the anime and the video games. And it's pretty accurate to the games, pretty much being identical. Never really understood why it's a duck hat. Apparently it's based off Arate Narimaki's cap, which is a pre-Dragon Ball anime reference. Also, Meta Knight shows up for a second to tell the cast it's Cutter Kirby. He has really no other role in the episode and might as well not be there. I mean, he does provide narration for Kirby's abilities as he attacks, but that's my job, so no, Meta Knight, I'm not letting you do that. Cutter Kirby begins to attack, showing how weak Slice and Splice is without his weapons. As with his boomerang, he just quickly cuts his arm off with little no effort. And man, especially since he's voiced, that looks painful. Like, you can just feel like your arm getting cut off when you see that. Like, holy moly. Cutter Kirby then proceeds to cut the poor monster in half. And, you know, the fact that he can talk makes this a bit disturbing. He does not die right away, though, which is even more weird. Kirby then uses his cutter to aim it at Rick and Tokori, and Tiff uses the sunrod to turn the pair back to normal. Honestly, a waste of time because they are terrible characters, and Tokori is useless. Indeed, they then try to fuse Folo and Fala back into Fofa, but due to the time squandered on Tokori, Slice and Splice finally cuts the mortal coil, and the sunrod fades into dust. Now, some people have complained that it makes no sense why the explosion would only destroy the sunrod and not harm any of the kids or the characters there, or even the floor. This is a rather silly complaint. It wasn't the explosion of Slice and Splice that destroyed the moonrod. Rather, it was the fact that the moonrod was connected to his life force, and when he died, it also ceased to exist. It's also why Kirby lost the cutter ability immediately afterwards. DDD and Escargoon, having just woke up, had made it up there to see the monster's death, causing DDD to cry over his wasted money.
Oh, Slice and Splice didn't make the cut! Well, that fortune teller warned you, sire, and I quote, "When you try making trouble, your trouble will double."
Oh, and yes, the fortune by Mabel was a reference to Team Rocket's phrase from the Pokemon anime, another Nintendo-based anime translated by the infamously terrible 4Kids. Honestly, it's a much worse anime than the Kirby one. Frankly, it has so much more filler, and it's just overall way inferior. Back to the plot, the group lament the destruction of the Star Rod, and Tiff apologizes to Folo and Fala for failing to get the two back together. Maybe you shouldn't have wasted so much time on Tokori. The pair are, however, still pretty happy. though saying that while they may have two bodies, they still have one heart, and that they are perfectly happy being together, even if Fofa is gone for good. Kirby still calls them Fofa until they correct him, and the episode ends with him finally getting their names right, as he ceases to dead name them. Ha ha ha, who am I kidding? Dead naming's not a thing. Say, what are my thoughts on this episode? Well, let's go over the positives, then the negatives, then a conclusion. The overall plot is interesting. For something based on a quite frankly pair of flat characters, Folo and Fala, the idea being split in half and mixed together is actually done in a way that's actually pretty interesting. The monster was, I'll just say it right now, the best so far. And I genuinely believe, having watched all 100 episodes, he is one of the best monsters of the anime. Shame that he didn't come back, ever. Not in the games or in the anime. And I think his design would have been pretty good in the video games if they ever used him. As for the negative, I find the whole cause of this plot to be a bit contrived. I mean, Dee didn't need Fola or Furla to do the delivery, so why not just have a Waddle Dee do it? And even if you wanted them to do it, he didn't need them to split up. Now, to be fair, the Japanese original doesn't have an explanation in that he wanted Fala to do a back rub. However, the Japanese version also has its own problems. It doesn't explain what was going on with the whole slice and splice thing. And yes, the explanation was perfectly fine. I don't see an issue with it. There's no reason to get offended by it. It's a over 20-year-old cartoon. Like, grow up already. Another negative would be how Sir Ibram and Ladylike really hampered the plot. Not only the obvious by, binding Kirby's mouth, that in a way that pretty much ensured what was going to happen happened. Also, how they just blew the load with the reveal. And really, if they had just translated it so that it said he was originally a monster named Fofa, that would still be perfectly fine, if a bit contrived. But they went so far to say he was a monster split in two. How would they know that? Really, they shouldn't have even mentioned it at all. They should have just said he was given to us by DDD. And that would have perfectly not ruined the surprise. And even then, Fofa isn't really all that special. Not worthy of Enemy's reappearance for the first time. But then again, a lot of the criticism levied at this episode is just bunk. Man-spreading where there are no legs, issues caused by translations, claiming the death of Slice and Splice should not have been explosive. Overall, I would highly recommend this episode, but it's not the best. It has the best monster, though, and it is really best to have appropriate expectations going forward. I would heavily recommend watching this episode, and watching the whole anime for that matter. I'm the Dark Master, and join me next time on the Kirby Right Back at Ya Retrospective. Because, ooh boy, the next episode's going to be a doozy. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We need some help from you now. Come on, Scooby-Doo, I see you, pretending you got a sliver. But you're not fooling me, 'cause I can see the way you shake and shiver. You know we got a mystery to solve, Scooby-Doo, be ready for your act. Don't hold back, and Scooby-Doo, if you come through, you're gonna have yourself a Scooby snack. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, here are you, ready and you're willing. If we can count on you, Scooby-Doo, I know we'll catch that villain.